Buchanan. Sorry.
Hi, Joan.
Turn my mic on. We'll go ahead and get started. We have, just for everybody to realize that we do have Assemblywoman Buchanan on the phone from her remote location. Do you have any members of the public with you in San Ramon, or are you by yourself?
No.
Okay, so if anybody does come there and wants to speak, just let us know and they can speak. So we have in the room our other subcommittee members, Scott Harvey and Kathleen Moore, and I thought maybe what we could do is start with any opening comments from the committee members. I think our goal here today is to, as we discussed at the last State Allocation Board meeting, is to take a look at are there other ways that we can expedite shovel-ready projects and also keep our cash balance low. And we have, we're going to have someone here from the Department of Finance who can talk a little bit about how we, in the past, have used the PMIA, just for everybody's understanding. And then we can discuss all of the various aspects of the cash reserves that we have available in our program. So with that, I think I'll ask Kathleen if she has anything she wants to add.
No, Cynthia, I think you've expressed it very well. We're happy to be here. I do think this is an issue that we need to grapple with, and I'm appreciative of the staff coming up with some possibilities, and I'm interested.
I'm having a hard time hearing. I don't know if maybe if you need to turn the volume up on your speaker. Or
Is there any chance we could move, is there any chance, how's she hearing through that?
Actually, if you move it closer to Cynthia.
That's what I was thinking.
Let's see if I can do that. Okay, let me get on the other side. Hold on.
But I'm worried when we have people speaking if she'll be able to hear.
Yeah.
It just created a health hazard. Perhaps a safety one, too.
Well, I don't think I think just put her down.
I could just put her down right here.
You're right.
Just put her right.
Yeah, but I don't have enough cord. That's what I'm trying.
Oh, you don't? Oh.
It's right here. That's as far as it goes.
Okay. Well, yeah, that works.
You'll have to put a microphone on her too, or they can hear her broadcast.
All right. That means you'll have to share your mic. I'm
I'll
sorry.
be happy to share my mic.
Wish I had another table.
What about
I'm sorry. I just
we're
a folly. Okay.
we can,
That while I'm
Sure.
yeah.
This is actually just an electric cord. This isn't even a full cord.
Do you need an extension cord? I have
No, I can just, you guys can plug it up there if you want.
plug it in. Oh, up here in this.
If we unplug it, you may be disconnected
Yeah, Joan,
briefly.
we might lose you, so you may have to call.
Because
Okay.
we're trying to move the actual...
Yeah, we
She's
did.
gone.
Bye, Joan. It's nice having you here.
Oh, it is connected to the cord. But maybe you can
Okay, so you got it.
you can see if it can start.
Is that a little bit more?
That was a little bit more.
Full. There is more.
There's more. Now, do you have it plugged in still?
Okay. And which mic is the webcast mic? Is it coming through here, or is it coming through this? This is your mic. So we can put one of those here for her.
So you, sure, okay. And that can be yours, there you go.
So when Joan speaks, we'll have to,
And this, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Is this just... How is this here? Like that? Okay.
now does she's going to call us then.
she's gonna call back, but I have her number too.
They're still ripping up. I don't think we need any more. I
Yeah,
think we're good.
good.
Thank you.
I just need her to call back. Is that her? Hello? Oops.
How do you do this?
Hello? Hi, okay. I think so, yeah. All right. So, as we were saying, Ms. Moore.
I'll just be very brief, and so we can get moving.
I got it.
We're pleased to be here and appreciative of the efforts of staff, and look forward to hearing from stakeholders as well. So thank you.
Mr. Harvey?
Likewise, I think this is a proper thing to do. When you've got cash and you've got need and you're trying to get people to work and make schools safer, I think these discussions are most appropriate, and I'm kind of excited about the options, because to me they don't work unless you incentivize the district to do something. And I think these options capture that, and I'm going to be interested in hearing more about that fact. But I certainly want to put money out and to build schools, and if you're construction ready, I want to go. So I'm happy to be here as well.
Assemblymember Buchanan?
I think both of you have expressed my sentiment completely.
Okay, great. All right then. So I think what I propose doing is having staff, just so everybody, I just want to make it really clear that I met with the staff last week, and we just noodled through a bunch of options, and that's what's reflected in the staff memo. And I think it's really important for everybody to understand that it's not necessarily a recommendation. It's not necessarily a limit. There's maybe other ideas that other people have, and maybe as we have a discussion today, we can have, other things will come out that we can draw upon. But I kind of have a view of we structured it in the memo this way, kind of some short-term issues that relates to the $600 million of cash that's currently in our account. We also are going to have, cash management issues related to rescissions that are going to be happening in the short term, and we also have future bond sales. So I think we can kind of think of it as, we may have different approaches depending on which pot of funding that we're talking about. And so as people comment on this and as we go through it, I would suggest that everything's on the table, and that we're not limited by the words on the paper. We just know that this process is helped by having some words on the paper to help us talk through issues. So I think with that, Juan, do you want to go ahead and walk us through the memo?
Certainly. Start with page 2 and option 1. This option is for districts that have received an apportionment, meaning that they actually have cash, but they have yet to request a fund release. We realize that there's some districts that may not, may need a little bit more time to come in and request a fund release. They do have the 18 months. These are the projects that came in, received an apportionment, and they have 18 months to submit a fund release. But for many factors, they're not ready to go right now. So this allows the district to buy time. And by buying time, we mean that they would be taking out the apportionment and place that project on the unfunded list. So what does that mean? It basically gives the district an opportunity, if they know they're not ready now, but they don't want to give up that apportionment, it gives them certain assurances that they can be placed on the unfunded list. And where on the unfunded list they will go is something that we can have a discussion. There's options there. But basically this option is for districts that have an apportionment, they're not ready to go right now, they can sort of step out of line and get placed on the unfunded list to get more time. That's the basic concept of option 1. But I can be happy to answer any questions about the specifics, or if we want to get into some of the
My thinking is that if we kind of click through the short-term options,
Okay.
and then we can discuss those a little bit.
Okay.
Work for everybody.
Okay. Option 2 is what we call the swap option. This is for a district that has projects on both the apportioned list, but they haven't requested a fund release yet, and a project on the unfunded list. Now, we've taken a look, and we know that we have some districts that have that situation, and that they have also submitted a certification under the first priorities and funding round. They have certified that they have a project on the unfunded list that is ready to submit a fund release if they receive an apportionment within 90 days. So this option gives a district an ability to swap the projects. If they have a project that received an apportionment, but again, they're not ready to go with that project, but they have a different project on the unfunded list, and they are ready to move with that one, it gives them the ability to swap the projects. And we have to make sure that they're of equal value as the apportionment or less. There's certain conditions with that, but that's the basic concept with this swapping. A school district that has projects on both lists and they want to swap the projects. Option 3 is similar to option 2. I'm sorry.
I think Ms. Moore has a question.
Okay.
Just on that one, I know this is probably another layer of detail, and I'm not sure if you've thought about it, but if a district were to swap the project, and in fact the swapped project is worth more, so they're capped at a certain amount for that project. Let's say, you know, they're swapping at $25 million and the project's really $35 million state share. Is there a mechanism for them to pick up the $10 million state share later, or are they giving that up, or has staff thought about that?
We haven't really thought about all the details.
Okay.
It's something that we have to address, you know, when they're not exactly the same, because it's not really going to happen. So what happens if there's a remaining balance, and what we do with that? Okay. But it's not something that we've really
fleshed out yet.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Mr. Harvey?
I guess my question is very, very similar, because for me, for this to succeed, we have to have real options, not those that appear to be valuable but don't have the possibility of working, because you don't have, in your example, a district that has a project equal to or somewhat less. I don't know if you flushed out how many folk might even qualify for this option. Sounds good, looks good, but is it really a viable option unless you do something like Ms. Moore suggests? You have a way of not capping it, but recognizing it's got to be within a range, and how do you make up that difference? So I'll be interested in knowing a little bit more about it, the viability of the option as we discuss it. Thank you.
So far, we've identified at least 30 million of projects that are in this situation, meaning that a district has a project on both lists. We need to delve further into that to see, you know, the dollars and far as matching up project to project, whether it's more, whether it's less. But we do know that there's at least 30 million worth of projects that, from a district that has a project on both lists.
Okay, thank you.
And may I add, there's also limitations within the bond source as well. So that's an extra layer that we have to sort that out as well.
What is that?
So, I mean, you may have a project that's on the unfunded list that may be, let's say, an ORG project. And then likewise, you may have an apportionment sitting on the live list, and it may be for a COS project. That is, you can't do an exchange for, it has to be obviously like for like or within the source, right?
Like kind, okay.
Right.
Does Assemblymember Buchanan
Yeah.
have any questions? We can't see your body.
No, well, I do, but I think I'm going to probably reserve until after we go through all the options, finish going through all the options here.
Okay. One?
The third option is similar to option 2, but this is, again, for a district that has projects on both lists, but the project that they have on the apportioned but yet unreleased list, that project the district knows will not be able to move forward, again, for whatever reason. So this option gives the district the ability to rescind that project, not place them on the unfunded list, but just rescind it entirely if the district knows, with the condition that they can swap another project that is on the unfunded list. So again, the difference between option 3 and option 2 is that this option 3 is for districts that have a project on the apportioned list, but they know they will not be moving forward, and a district elects to rescind that project in exchange for one that's on the unfunded list. And one other thing that I did want to highlight is for for all of these options, these would all be voluntary options that the district would have the ability to enter into one or several of these options. Those are the short-term options in terms of what we've identified as something that we could do to try and expedite the fund release. I can pause here.
Did you do option 3? I guess.
Yes, I just did option 3.
Yeah, why don't we, do you want to talk a little bit about short-term options for a minute? And maybe hear from some of the audience members. I just have generally a couple of comments on this question of, and I think Lisa Silverman called it live apportionments. And I think there's one thing that we just have to put on the table, and I don't have a perfect answer for it, is that there is a question of whether or not what that promise is, that apportionment that was made by the State Allocation Board, what is the character of that? Is it a contract? Is it something, can we legally, I'm asking the legal question, can we legally move that money around? And that's one, it's a complicated question, as everybody's aware of. These bond law questions are difficult to answer, so we don't know that. Some of us are starting to take a look at that, but that just may mean that after all of this, that we say there's no way to do this. And that's why when we were coming up with options, we were, looking at ways of making it voluntary. Generally speaking, for myself, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, and I'd like to hear commentators talk about this, about the notion that districts can just switch within their own funds, because the effect of that is that they will be they will have the ability of moving a project ahead of other districts' projects. And the one thing that all of you have done for me this year is made me very sensitive to the order of the list. And I think that's why priorities and funding work so well, because it doesn't exactly, it retains the character of the order of the list and doesn't really cause a jumping. It sort of does, but it's at least a fair jumping. And there might be an argument here that just if a district can swap itself, that it may not be fair. And I'd like to just hear from people about that topic.
Well, I have a problem with both options 2 and 3, because I think that that takes our funding and treats it as though we're giving a grant amount to a district without regard to the list. Now, option 1, the reason we might want to explore that a little bit further is that you could potentially craft that in a way that you could benefit existing projects on the list that are waiting to get funded, and also, so those districts would benefit, or those projects, and it also might be a benefit to the district that is, needs a little bit more time to sell bond money or whatever to complete a project. So, something like that could potentially benefit both. But I think options 2 and 3, they're a little bit more complicated in that, and that gets into whether or not you're funding projects or you're providing, just certain X number of dollars to a district.
Right. I think I agree with you said it better than I did.
Let me offer a subtle counter to that, and I'll put it in the context of today. From my perspective, we're not changing the base program. We're recognizing that we're in a rather unique economic situation. We haven't sold bonds. We've got districts that have, for various reasons, chosen not to proceed with projects. We've got $600 million that we can put to good use to put people to work and to build schools. And it's an emergency situation. I think we categorized our first experiment as that. So to me, this is going to be a short-term thing that the board in the future reflects on, talks about, perhaps doesn't institute again. But because of the uniqueness of this time and the fact that we've got a fair amount of dollars sitting there, to me, I'm not willing quite yet to let go of option 2 and 3, because I think it facilitates putting money out, project ready, 90 days, and it benefits Californians. So to me, I want to hear more, obviously, from the stakeholders, but I think these are all exciting options in the framework of today's economy.
I have one further comment, a little bit of a wrinkle on number one, in that from the information that we received from staff, the December list of projects that would lose their apportionments because the 18 months are up, that would be December 10th, that's a $100 million list. That's roughly a month away, a little over a month away. Either those districts with those projects will have to perfect them within the next 30 days, or they actually will be back in the pool. And my concern is this: those that are waiting at the other end of the list that could possibly move forward in a 90-day time frame, there's $100 million right there. And we don't know how much of that may perfect. The unfortunate piece in my mind about those projects is they're mainly career technical education projects that were funded, December 10th, or that were funded a year and a half ago. I find that unfortunate, but that's the character of that list. So I think with that wrinkle, we ought to look at our options.
Okay, let's ask, is there anyone that wants to talk about this kind of short-term, cash on hand questions? Mr. Duffy, Gary?
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Well, actually, you have to use both. Maybe sit in the same chair there. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members, Tom Duffy for the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. I appreciate this discussion. The first option is something that actually has been around for well over a year. It was being marketed by the California Building Industry Association, hopeful, I think, of averting level 3 by having dollars that were available for the board to make apportionments. I think it's important for you to consider option 1. I'm a school district guy, like Ms. Moore. That's where I grew up, and that's why I'm sitting here today. I don't know that I would be incentivized with option 2 and option 3. If with the difficulty, and Mr. Harvey, you and I have had this discussion before, with the difficulties that school districts are having today, this has been the 3 worst years that I've ever seen in public education. School districts are having difficulty with general fund, capital dollars, and others. If you want to incentivize them, I think you need to offer something additional. Now, I'm not sure exactly how you do that, but with option 1, certainly a district can say, I'm not ready to move. My board may be unwilling to advertise for a bid because we've just laid off teachers, and the community and the Teachers Association won't understand how we can spend these dollars, but we don't have dollars for teachers. And again, Mr. Harvey, you and I have had this discussion before. If there were to be an incentive where something additional were provided to the district, and I'll have to think about how to maybe suggest that to you.
If you had any ideas.
I'd probably offer several.
I mean, I think they're probably. I mean, we obviously have talked about this a lot ourselves, and I think there are some things you could do. Some of it might require legislation. Some of it also might be thoughts that, and one of the things I want to get into, and after we go through this initial stakeholder discussion, is I want to call Greg Rogers from the Department of Finance up here, who's one of our infrastructure experts. And one of the things that I've said this all along, and you and I have had this conversation innumerable times, but we are in this paradigm shift, and there is that. The program's going to have to work differently in the future, and that's going to be a combination of, if there's a new bond, it's a combination of our existing program, and that's going to transition after, over the next year. And so I think thinking of incentives is really important. I think thinking about what is it that how do we keep this program as a lean, mean cash machine, but still get the schools built, still run the program the way we always have? I think that's our challenge, so challenging you to think of incentives.
I'll be pleased to do that. I think it's important that you, as a subcommittee of the board, are having this discussion at this time. Ms. Bryant, we have greatly appreciated your leadership and the board's leadership. We supported the priorities and funding item last May and continue to support it, including now, because we believe that you and the board have done, I think, an excellent job of trying to get districts to move forward, to really incentivize them. Come in the door, promise that you'll be on the street within 90 days, and we'll make sure you are funded. So we continue to support that. We would very much want you to support the sale of additional bonds if that's possible in the short term. And I know we have the three of you on this current board only for a very short period of time. But the board's leadership and your leadership are important to us, and we thank you for your efforts. And I'll think of the incentives.
Okay.
I'll make a list for you.
Okay.
Tom, if I may, there is one incentive that I see in number one for a district that may be coming up on losing their apportionment, of allowing them to go back in line without a refile, which means a recalculation of eligibility, which may be affected by any changes in enrollment. So I think there is a baseline incentive for someone probably further up on the list and that may be losing their project soon, or versus those maybe further back. But they could have the same issue as well if they've lost enrollment. I think that's one of the incentive. That's the only incentive I can see right now if I were a district that I might avail myself to.
I agree with you, and we've thought about that and discussed that because of the difficulties for districts with the state giving largesse to say, well, if you want to step out of line right now for funding, we'll make sure that project remains fundable into the future, and I agree that is an incentive.
Let me offer a second incentive, perhaps, and that is recognizing that giving something up is difficult unless you're on that deadline. I would support putting the swapped or the buy. What's it called? Yeah, it is a switch.
The given up project.
The given up project right below the health and safety on the unfunded list. So you're not forcing them to go in line to the project they switched. You're not forcing them to go all the way down to the bottom, but as a higher incentive to do this switch for whatever your motivation is, I would ask us to consider allowing them to go right below our health and safety on the unfunded.
I see that, but as I said, I grapple with a little bit of the, and I know we're in an emergency situation, but with the fairness issue, particularly projects that potentially will come off the list in December. If I'm a district at the other end of the list, and I'm just waiting for somebody to come off the list so that maybe I'm going to have a shot, I would be hard-pressed to support that they get to go back up in front of me again, because they gave up their spot 1 month before they actually were going to be forced to give up their spot.
What has been suggested, Ms. Moore, in these discussions over the last 9 or 10 months has been keeping the date. If a district were to give up its apportionment, to keep the date so that it stayed in that priority that you were speaking to, Ms. Bryant. So that's something I think to consider. If I were a school district superintendent today and I had a project that was stalled for whatever reason, keeping my date would probably be something that was a positive thing for me to forego funding.
Well, in essence, that would be what you said, Mr. Harvey, because the date would be earlier than anybody else on the list. So it essentially would be right after health and safety.
Yeah.
And assuming, Mike, Joan?
I was going to say, I mean, we're assuming if we allow a district to swap, which I still am not even close to being convinced, just to rearrange the list, and then you can, whatever's new, you can wait 18 months potentially, but the goal is to figure out how do we make sure that we get money to projects that are ready to bid immediately.
Well, I think that was part of the condition. You had to be ready to go 90 days. I think Juan will clarify a feature for you.
That's true. When we looked at the list, we were looking at the projects that submitted, the district that submitted a certification that their project would be ready to submit a fund release within 90 days if they receive an apportionment. Those are the ones that we compare to the projects that are on the unportioned but yet unreleased list. So we're basing the fact that they're ready to construct on their certification that they submitted in the first priority round.
So the swap project would have to go within 90 days. It wouldn't have 18 months.
So we'd have to change the rule there to say the only way you can swap is if you did within, if you have a signed contract within 90 days.
Yeah,
I
it
think
would have,
that's part of our regulations. We're not, these short-term options don't change the regulations the board approved on the first go-round.
well, I actually think, though, I think we would have to structure this with the 90-day option in it. I think we were assuming that.
Yes, we would have some minor regulation changes to address that.
Right.
That's what we believed. And just one final comment, if I may. I appreciate very much your comment earlier that you have been schooled by us, the stakeholders, and the sacred quality of date order that's been with the program from the old program to the new, and I appreciate you recognizing that. Thank you.
If I were to be here much longer, Mr. Duffy, I would love to have a robust discussion about why it's 18 months and not 12 or some other figure, but we won't do that today.
Well,
I can tell you the history of that some other time.
yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure it'll be over coffee when I'm retired.
Hi, Gary Gibbs, California Building Industry Association. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having this committee meeting. I think the overall goal here is admirable. What I'd like to do is talk about this wonderful chart that was created by the LPSC, the cash flow chart, and basically to kind of frame it, I think it's really addressing where Kathleen's going. You're looking at $600 million in apportioned projects today, which means you also have $600 million sitting in cash in the bank. And the goal is try to move that money out as quickly as you can in terms of shovel-ready projects. The California Building Industry, our only advocacy for this is to try to create shovel-ready projects. It has no impact on anything else out there. I mean, it definitely doesn't affect level 3 or anything. We just believe in moving projects out. But if you take a look at this chart, and if you do nothing, the first $200 million will move out within 3 months. So those are already shovel-ready projects. One of two things will happen. Either that first $200 million through January, they'll build the projects because the districts have already bid them out and they're going to sign contracts shortly and build, or if they're not ready to build, the projects will be rescinded and that $200 million will go into shovel-ready projects. So for me, so to focus on this first $200 million through January of 2011 makes no sense because it defeats your goal. Your goal is to move cash out quickly. It's going to happen regardless if we have this meeting or not. So to me, what you're really looking at is the $300 million 12 months out. And the concern is that 12 months out from October on, basically the districts have 12 months before they have to sign a contract and build. And so if there's some way to leverage that money, if there's some way to borrow that money or loan that money to shovel-ready projects now, well, no one's advocating jeopardizing, changing where they are in the queue right now. I think that would be counterproductive. But to maybe loan that money to shovel-ready projects and replenish that as you have bond sales in spring of 2011 and fall of 2012 makes a lot of sense to me. But I would really recommend focusing long-term and not short-term because otherwise we're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It becomes self-defeating. And the second part of this is I would try to recommend keeping this as simple as you can. To me is you got $300 million a year from now, borrow it somehow, loan it, it's cash in there today, loan it for somebody who can build today, who's next in line, and then just replenish it down the road. And if in the worst case you don't sell bonds, have some backup position, a credit line, short-term credit line. So it's a kind of a quasi what we were doing 2008. It's kind of a quasi scenario. The other thing I do absolutely support kind of where John Buchanan is coming on 2 and 3. I think A, you're adding huge complexity, but B, you are going to be discriminating against all those districts in the state of California who cannot swap, who cannot change. And I don't think that's where we want to go or where you want to go. I mean, I don't particularly care which options you take. I think they're all good options, but I think that's kind of discriminatory. And I think you just want to move in date order of the next projects ready to go and try to get the money out as simply as possible. So anyway, those are the general comments to start the dialogue. Again, thank you very much. Yes, Scott.
Do you have a model you'd recommend for loaning this money?
My recommendation would be that you loan the $300 million that's in the account now, subject to when you sell the next bonds, you replenish that $300 million. If, to me, a lot of that money is not going to draw out to even 2012. I mean, you got some of it. If, in the worst case scenario, which probably won't happen, you have maybe a $100 million shortfall in terms of you hadn't been able to sell bonds, then I think you need to have a backup position, some kind of credit line. It'd be a short-term credit line until the bonds are sold. And maybe it's $100 million, $200 million. I know that's maybe unfeasible, but I think that's not a bad, at least option to look at, because the cost of that short-term credit line, it's just a bridge loan. Because you have bonds, you are going to sell it sometime, and in the worst case, okay, you have to say there's $100 million sitting there where you have to go finance internally. You haven't sold bonds in fall of 2011. You borrow that money internally through a loan. The cost of that loan is going to be till you sell the next bond. And so maybe that's a couple % for 6 months or a year. So maybe the cost is $2 million to loan the money. But you're always backed up with bond sales. So it's not like it's a risk scenario. It's just a bridge loan to get you through the time. So that would be something along that line.
I think what you're really saying is we should manage our cash flow differently to get money out.
Exactly.
And I agree. I think that's probably, if you, the best analogy I could give you, if you've got an insurance company, I know no one likes to talk about insurance, but you know that depending on the kind you have, you've always got 1 or 2 or 3 months. Say if you're medical insurance, you might have like 2 or 2.5 months of what they call it incurred but not reported, right?
Yep.
So you've got to keep a reserve. So the question here is, over the 6-month time period, how many people ask for their money in the first 6 months, the second 6 months, or the last 6 months? And you take a look at that over time, and we manage our cash flow in such a way that we actually can extend out more approvals, but because we're managing we're granting approvals in accordance with how we anticipate our cash flow, but we're never giving more than our total bonding capacity.
Right. I think that's precisely how this program was managed prior to the shutdown of the PMIA. That's essentially what we did. This staff is very good at understanding their cash flow needs, but in that shutdown period, which no one knew how long it was going to be, and at the time everyone assumed it was going to come back, we made intermediate steps, and I completely agree with you. And it might be. Is there anybody else that wants to comment on this short-term question?
There's one difference. If we continue with the old program today, we would have apportion projects of close to $3 billion. So I'm not saying going out and apportion $3 billion. We're looking at some kind of compromised position. We then went to the other extreme where we have to find the cash and have it sitting there for 18 months. We sell the bonds first. So somewhere maybe between those two extremes of $3 billion in apportion projects, if we had the old program today versus $600 million sitting in portion projects cash today, and somehow manage that flow so you're not at risk instead of having all that cash just sitting there for 18 months. That's more of a policy decision. That's something that can be implemented more long term. I mean, I think we're looking at it short term, but it's something strategically long term.
Mr. Gibbs, when you talk about the $300 million, you're talking after January?
I'm talking after October 2011. There's $200 million through January. Right. Then there's $100 million in apportionments from January till October 2011. And then there's $300 million October 11th on.
How about your $100 million?
That's in the first 3 months.
And the $100 million is up December 12th.
Exactly.
That's in the first 3.
So, I mean, there's a piece here to me that, I hope those districts, every single one of them, perfect those projects. I think that's the best case scenario, particularly because it's predominantly career technical education, and that program was so well supported all the way around. So, I mean, that's the best scenario ever, and then those jobs are out there. However, if that does not happen, I mean, the State Allocation Board could meet on December 15th and start the process for that $100 million right then.
Funny you should say that.
We're meeting December 8th, I think.
Yeah, that leads us into, actually, as one of the things we realized as we were going through some of these options is we started thinking about that exact fact, and we have this priorities round that's open right now, and we're noodling on the notion of extending the deadline on this priorities round that we're seeking interest on, and taking that money, moving the State Allocation Board meeting a week later, and taking that money and maybe doing some advanced borrowing and making a larger apportionment in December. I think that we just really started talking about it in the last 48 hours, but I think that we can do that. And I think we can get a large chunk of cash apportioned in the month of December in the priorities round, and really get a large investment made. And so I think that's one of the things we want to try to figure out between now and the next board meeting. Anything else from you, Gary?
Just to reinforce that, if you do nothing, there's going to be $200 million going out over the next 3 or 4 months, including that $100 million. And I agree with you. I hope that $200 million, because it's at the back end of that 18 months, I hope they build. I mean, that would be the ideal world. But if not, that money, either they're going to be building, it's going out, or they're going to be rescinding, and you're going to be allocating it to
And 90
projects.
days, up to 90 days later, someone else could be building.
Yes, exactly. So we don't have to do anything on that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bakke?
Wasn't prepared to speak today, so I really appreciate Gary's comments a lot. I think we're in a point right now where we really have to kind of think outside the box of how we operate and do business, and I think looking at how we manage our cash is an extremely important. The pseudo PMIB proposal that has been talked about is a very interesting one. It's one the district would certainly support in helping develop. We have over $400 million in projects on the unfunded list. Every one of them is ready to go. We just can't get to there because we're just at a certain point in the line. But we can help, we can contribute. But we just need to figure out a way to be creative with how we do it. If we do this cash management, we certainly can step up and participate in that. One of the things that isn't included in this conversation is environmental hardship projects. It's another way of looking at other projects that can actually move cash out. Environmental hardship projects don't get an unfunded approval. They don't get a apportionment from the state. They get an approval from OPSC. I'm sure Juan or Lisa can speak to that more. But these are projects that are ready to go that just need their advanced cash to do the site cleanups and get going. Many of our projects in LA fall into that category and are ready to go as well. So there's another way to look at cash to keep projects moving that's not included because it doesn't fall under the unfunded list. So I just want to put that out there for consideration as we talk about what types of projects there are. There are projects, they're just not represented on this list.
Quick comment on that. The only thing I will support are options that are fair to districts throughout California, both urban, suburban, and rural, big, large, and medium size, and I think these do that. I'd like to hear more about how many other districts are in.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Juan or Lisa can speak to what it looks like throughout the state, the environmental hardships, but I don't think it's limited to being an urban district. So I don't know if you guys want to speak to that, what the environment looks like today.
I don't have the list of projects we submitted, but environmental hardships, these are the projects that are going to take longer than 6 months to clean up. Department of Toxic Substances Control has certified it's going to take a little bit longer to clean up, so they qualify under this other provision under environmental hardship to give them money. And they are in a similar situation that we had some of the charter school projects that had a preliminary apportionment, yet they didn't have cash backing them. So it's a similar situation with environmental hardships. It's something that we can definitely take a look at. But to answer your question, Mr. Harvey, I don't know how many are in one region versus the other. I don't have a list right now.
But it's not just one large
It's
district.
not
I
an
don't
LUSD problem. Thank you.
All right. So if it's okay, what I'd like to do is call Greg Rogers up, he's a assistant PBM, what is program budget manager. But he is the executive director, executive secretary of the Public Works Board, which is the way the state does most of the rest of its infrastructure funding. And he's our expert in the department on infrastructure. So I think you've heard the discussion. You and I have had a couple conversations about our program, and I think you'd be helpful to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, again, Greg Rogers at Department of Finance. No, I think you guys, from the discussion, are on the right track. I mean, every program within the state that uses GO bond proceeds has had to look about how they allocate the money prior to, compared to before December 2008, when the Pooled Money Investment Board stopped doing the AB 55 loan program. I think that affected everyone statewide. And so since then, my own projects, we use lease revenue bonds, but a different kind of bond, but we really relied on the AB 55 loan program, and we've had to go out and look at legislation and change the way we fund projects to do it more on a cash basis. We had to fund them sooner in the process than later. But it kind of comes down to cash management. When we did our budget letter that laid out the plan for all the departments and agencies, it kind of talks about trying to use the bond proceeds quickly and in a timely manner. And all the agencies have had to look at that and how they administer their programs. I think some agencies have struggled more than others on how to do that. Because when we've looked at this fall, what we did is, because we've had since March of 2009 and the fall sales and this past spring, we've actually gone back and looked, our department has, on the amount of cash sitting there in all these different bond acts. And it's kind of astonishing on some of the bond acts, the balances that are there, and we kind of indicate in our budget letter we would be looking at that as far as when we're sizing this next bond sale. Hopefully by Thanksgiving we'll be back in the market. So we're the ones that kind of coordinate with the Treasurer's Office and our office on just trying to determine on a statewide basis what to include in the GO bond sale. Obviously it's not only education bonds, it's resources, it's all the different agencies that have propositions. So to the extent we're issuing money or selling bonds that in the money sitting there in the Treasury and not being used, the state general fund is paying debt service on those bonds. So it's incurring a cost. We're paying, I don't know how much it would be for this, but if you have $800 million sitting there, and if you assume to issue the bonds about 5% interest you're paying on that, it's $40 million a year roughly that we would be paying that could be used for other general fund purposes. So to the extent from a general fund perspective, if you aren't using those proceeds in a timely manner, it is costing the state to pay the debt service on that. Kind of from our, and also I think it is what you're on the track as far as looking and try to somehow line up, and I know it sounds like there's other program problems here, but trying to line up when you need the cash. So ideally you'd want to sell the bonds, and then you'd want to start drawing on that money right away instead of just having the money sit there in the Treasury. And I think you guys sound like you understand that problem. But that's ideally how we've tried to shift the other programs, or tried to work with them to understand that and try to, use the money in that manner.
Yeah, Ms. Moore?
Ms. Rogers, have you, in working with all the programs, have you seen any I think it was written as option 4 in our book, but it's more acting, it's this issue of apportioning more cash than actually we have, and the risk factor there, and working with that. Have you seen any? Is that a viable mechanism? Because it helps us with our short-term issue.
I really can't address that question.
Okay.
On that, so.
Okay, so one of the things, I just totally lost my train of thought. Do you have another question? It really just.
While you're gathering your thought,
Yeah.
he may not choose to answer given what he just said, but I was going to say if you were the OPSC wizard and you had $600 million in cash, and you've heard the fact that some portion of that is expiring is in December, and this need to get money out to construction-ready, project-ready activities, how would you do it? Would you have a game plan? You've heard short-term options. You've heard about the Pooled Money Investment Board model, which I think is intriguing. Can you give me a
I think
40,000 view level, or how you might do it.
I think ideally you'd want to get information from each of the school districts on the projects that have been approved or pending and where they're at as far as the ability to let contracts and start using that money, and somehow trying to line up, I look kind of more vertically, when those districts would be in or when they could use the money, and try to line up your cash projections and how the cash would be used in that manner. So it'd be kind of like, kind of call it first in, first out or something like that. So the projects or schools that are ready to go, that they can demonstrate that they're ready to need a grant or can you start using the money, somehow you'd line those up first and do a projection with all the other ones that would fall down lower.
I think it might be, illustrative for people to understand that what we do internally at the department is that everyone knows our expert genius, Chris Ferguson, who's sitting back here. Chris works with OPSC, and they look at the unfunded list, and then that's what goes to Mr. Rogers' unit that's how they look at our needs, and then they review our cash, they look at what our needs are, and that's kind of how they make sizing determinations for the bond program. And I think that you hit on something that's really important, and it's something that we've never really required of districts, and we've been frustrated all year not knowing this information, but we really don't know what the school's thinking. And it's because we've never needed to know, because we've always apportioned, and then you have 18 months to do your cash drawdowns, and the staff was able to kind of do some rough estimates on cash, just looking at what the take rate had been over the previous 18 months, and generally worked out. And if we, then we just went to the PMIB and got a loan to cover it, and then we sold a certain number of bonds to cover our PMIB loans. So I think one of the things we should explore is how can we get more information from districts, and is that too burdensome? Is it something? It's something no one's ever had to do. We could assess districts' interest by when they turned in their 5005 or whatever the number is, and I think that would be one direction for us to go, so that we really know, so that when the staff at DOF is helping the treasurer's office size the bond, we are sizing ourselves based on actual cash needs. And as opposed to, right now, we really do it based on who's on that unfunded list, and we're just trusting that they're ready to go. But they aren't necessarily, because they have 18 months to do it. The district hasn't done anything wrong, but they've put a request in the way our programs worked. And I think maybe we need to think about making that conversion where our list we understand better about who's ready to go. And we can know that a little bit. We know more now because we have $1.2 billion. We had $1.2 billion of requests in the previous priorities funding round, and that reflects people that are ready to go in 90 days. And so that helps us. But are there other information we could ask the districts for? And is it a burden?
Also, I know other programs like the resource agencies, a lot of them do a lot of grants under those, and I know they've gone to more of a conditional grant award, where before they do a grant, basically they're getting the money right then. Where they've done a conditional award, you get a conditional grant, and then once we have the money, then we'll provide you the funding. But I don't know if that works in this program. And other ones are basically, the big state agencies, and kind of what I do on my board is we're managing each individual project, so we do know the timing of the projects, and we're trying to time it more, so the more information you have, that'd be kind of helpful too.
We have here we have 10 times the projects we have.
I've seen the list of projects when I get them in my unit. Yeah, there's a lot. That's for sure. So.
Any other questions for Greg?
It seems to me that we have sort of two issues that we're dealing with. One, I think, is the immediate issue of how can we get more money to projects to get into bid, so schools get their projects done, and contractors have business, and people who are unemployed get out to work. And the other question we have, I think, probably is going to merit more discussion, and that is, in terms of what our criteria is for how you move from one list to the other in the time frame, is that still realistic? Is that how we should be, is that what we should be doing? I mean, because we get into that, should it be 18 months, should it be 12 months, how are we making these decisions? So maybe what we ought to do is focus on what we can do short term in terms of cash flow management or whatever to get more money out, and then also then take a look longer term in terms of, the rules have changed over time. Why did they change? And is there something we should do? I mean, should we have some modifications so we get more information, or we're project moves on to the funded list, it's ready to go.
Yeah, good points.
I would just say on the more information, that will be helpful in the short term, potentially. But I agree with Assemblywoman Buchanan in that the long term, while it has been a very well functioning part of our regulation, the 18 months, I actually think because of the changed landscape that we have to look at that. And so there's the long-term issue, and that will be one of how we manage the cash and the needs of school districts, so that we are always well-positioned in this program to receive our share of limited infrastructure bonds. So I think there is the long-term, and we're going to need to address that, and it's going to need to be a lot of people at the table with great minds thinking about that, but knowing our landscape has changed. I think our short term is the $600 million, 200 of which is really short term in that it's going to be done in January, either out on the street or back to us. And then we have the probably about $300 million nut, so to speak, that we should really try and deal with to work both for districts and for our cash flow needs.
And we also have hopefully, knock on wood, we have a bond sale in November. Hopefully there'll be something for our program, and we don't know how we're going to do yet. So, we need to be poised on how we're going to handle that too.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Typically, we do have bond sales every fall and every spring. I think December 2008 was the one time we did not have a long-term GO bond sale. That's as far as I can remember also. And the other point I'd like to make too is for the AB 55 loan program that the Pooled Money Investment Board, based on my conversations with Treasurer staff, I don't see that ever changing for the GO bond program. They're pretty much want agencies to use the upfront bond proceeds. So it's a kind of a permanent change. I don't think it's going to go back to the way it was, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Can you stick around in case we have questions? Yeah. All right. We just have a half hour more on this. So any additional public comment at this point? Anything? Okay, well, maybe, so what?
Well, is option 4 viable? I mean, is it workable?
Well, I actually think option 4 is viable. I think what we need to do a little more legal work on it, because I think part of our issue is what is the nature of the promise that was made to those districts that are on the 600, who have been apportioned to 600, and the scenario is what happens if a district that's on that 600 comes in to get the cash, and for some reason we've run it all through. And I think what we have to do is just maintain a healthy reserve and look at short-term borrowing options. That it's possible that we would have that available to us, although it's complicated and we're not 100% sure how that would work. But I think that option 4 is possible, and I think that I'm sort of hearing a consensus amongst the 4 of us that trying to see if we can do that would be really worth the effort of taking it back to the board, and if we can jiggle our schedule around a bit. We would also have the bond sale at the end of November to help. We can make adjustments and make sure we have adequate cash reserves for all those people on the list. But I think that we have in front of us the ability to do a very healthy, priorities round. I can't remember. Are we going to do that? Were we scheduled to decide the amount in November, or are we deciding the amount in December? We're just
Cash as of November 3rd.
Okay, so we're going to decide the amount, and then we would actually do the apportionment in December. Okay, and so that's why if we had a little bit of extra time, we could probably apportion everything, including the new bond sale, or.
Yeah, if the board extends, for example, right now the certification period ends November 7th or 8th, extend it for another month, and then in December make apportionments based on the cash that's available as of whatever date the board decides. So instead of November 3rd, cash available as of December 5th or whatever new date, and use all of that cash potentially for the next priorities and funding round.
Well, I, for one, would really support option 4. I think it's if we can make it viable, because it it causes the least angst, I think, both on staff and on school districts, in that we're still maintaining the integrity of the list, and yet we're extending the time, we're dealing with a short-term issue, and then I think we also need to, we've made a statement as a board around the long-term issue. We have the priorities and funding, but I think that we really need to tackle that in greater detail around the 18 months, so that our program is in sync with the reality of how cash is flowing to infrastructure projects in California.
Scott?
I agree entirely with that. I think option 4 is the cleanest option. It allows us to get out more money, and then we can make a thoughtful decision on the other without having districts feel like we're changing rules on a midstream.
Mr. Duffy has
Just,
returned to the table.
I don't know that I missed any discussion, but could we ask Mr. Morales if he could just walk us through option 4 and all that it entails?
Sure.
We talked a little bit about it, but basically, the board would be making apportionments for projects more than the cash that's available. Say there's a bond sale for $600 million, the board could make apportionments up to, say, $800 million. So the board would be apportioning more projects than cash available. That's the basic premise of option 4. It's not just using exactly the cash amount that's available, but making apportionments beyond the cash that's available.
Okay. And these would be real apportionments?
Yes.
So that they're alive, the district comes in, the funds are available?
Yes.
So there's a risk involved here, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to do this. You and I had a discussion, I think, several months ago about the concept, and I think that is a positive thing for the board to consider.
The risk is that for some reason that we don't make a correct guess, and we end up with, District X comes in for its cash, and that's the day that our bank account is dry, and our next bond sale isn't for 2 months, and that, that's what we don't know the answer to that question. How much cash reserve do we need to maintain? Do we have a short-term borrowing option, which we may, which through the state treasurer's office? Do we what can we do in that fact setting? I think and that is something that we've not, because we just haven't had to face it. And Kathleen's right. We're at a point where we have to face the facts. I mean, Greg just said it. The treasurer's office is clear. We just voted on a new policy at the Pooled Money Investment Board, which I happen to sit on, and there is not going to be an AB 55 program for general obligation bond programs like ours. It just isn't going to happen anytime in the near future. That's it. It's over for any foreseeable future. So how can we manage our cash better and get more projects out? And so I think we're just at that point. But we do have that risk of the day that our bank account's at zero and District X is asking for its $10 million. What is the nature of the promise we've made to District X? What is the liability that the state may face? And we have to know the answer to those questions so that we don't create additional liability. And we also don't create, what about District X? They're ready to go to contract and they don't have the cash that they're expecting from the state. Everybody's in a bad situation. And that's the situation that a lot of projects were in December of 2008. And we don't want to repeat that. We have to have a complete understanding of what all of that is. And we didn't think we always assumed that we would be able to go back to the old system where it didn't, if we got to that point, we just went over to the pooled money investment account and did a little borrowing. And we don't have that anymore. So we just have to answer those questions.
So two quick comments, if I might. I'm not an attorney. We have others who are, but it seems to me one concept you could consider in building this risk model is to say something like, if you happen to be District X and you happen to come in and there is no cash, tragically, you shall be at that point considered an unfunded project. It's just by fiat. There's no decision made. You go back to where you were before, and then you don't lose your place in line, and when the cash comes in, suddenly you're no longer on the unfunded. One thing to consider. The other issue I want to just clarify in my own mind, I love the model for the reasons you've articulated, Juan, on option 4. What I'm assuming is that given the depth of folk who are ready to go within 90 days, we're saying that by doing this, we'll have enough people drawing the money down quickly, and they're not just getting another clock to run 18 months, and we're not actually moving the money. I didn't hear that 90-day time frame. Are we assuming that there's just enough pent-up need that it would automatically happen? Because otherwise, it doesn't fit the other goal of you got to be ready in 90 days or you don't get the money.
That was the goal. That was the goal, is to continue on the 90-day pilot program.
I didn't
to
hear
extend
that. So it would be, that's all part of it. Then I love it.
And I think the board, I think at the last board meeting that the entire board was very clear on wanting to apportion from this point forward on a priorities and funding basis. That I think that we adopted the permanent regulation to be able to open around anytime, we decide to do that. And I think I didn't sense that there was a single dissenter on the board that didn't think that that was the appropriate thing to do. Now, I do think we have an obligation to discuss a little bit this question of health and safety and how are we going to handle that. And I think Eric brought up environmental hardship. We have the charter schools. There are some other little things, little funky pots that need to be worked into this system somehow, that we have to figure that part out as well. And maybe they somehow or another, I don't know, brighter minds we have to think about that, because I think that they're not in it's so easy on the just the normal everyday project. You're just on the list. We know, you move through, and we don't have policy decisions to make on those. But
well, given that it seems like there's consensus around option 4, would it be reasonable then to have staff take a look at, okay, if we wanted to proceed with this, how might we proceed in a rational way?
yeah, I think that's exactly what we should do.
Is there something on the agenda for next week relative to this
Yes.
for discussion? So you will have an opportunity to do something next Wednesday.
Yeah, we're intending to set the amount of money for the next priorities round, and I think we'll work on this notion of extending the deadline, moving the December board meeting to 1 week so that we can apportion the new bond sale, should we be so lucky, and we can apportion any of the amount of the cash that's in the account that we think we can use, and plus any of the rescissions that we get in November and December. So we should be able to foster together a really large infusion of cash to put into this priorities and funding round. And, we can encourage districts, maybe you can help us a little bit with this too, is encourage districts to think about whether or not they can go to contract in 90 days, and if they want to participate, by indicating their interest, and we'll give them more time to do so. We, can really do a big push, and in the first 3 months of 2011, have a very active building program.
You had asked last spring if we would query districts, and we did that survey. If that's something that you think would be helpful, we can try to do that again.
We know a lot. I mean, we know because we had the $1.2 billion. We know an awful lot about, there's a lot of unmet need. I think what we'd want to have everybody help us with is really encouraging everyone to once again go through their projects and see if they're ready, if they can get to contract. And the 90 days won't start until December 15th. So right now they have 145 days to, if a district today knows they can go to contract in about 145 days, they ought to start dusting it off and get going, because there'll be a lot, if we can get this to work, we'll have a lot of cash to put out in short order.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I did really want to, Barbara, I was wondering if you could just really quickly, just for the benefit of anybody on the webcast and anyone in the room, just update us on the priorities round that's going to end. I know down to the project where we are. This is the $408 million.
Right. Actually, that program has been very successful. I think we're down to 3 districts that have yet to submit their fund release. However, we're anticipating receiving 2 of them today because they were either being hand carried in or overnighted to our office. So by the time we get back there, those are probably already waiting for us. And then the last one is coming in on Monday. So I believe at this point, we may have had 100% success, provided those districts.
That's just exemplary. So,
Well, and really, the staff really, because I keep browbeating him, but the staff really has done. I mean, Barbara's, the whole staff at OPSC has been personally calling these districts and encouraging them, and they know where every single one is. So I'm really, really, hopefully next Wednesday we'll have that announcement that we got 100%. I don't think that'll always happen. We always expected that, there'd be a district or 2 will drop off, but in this instance, we've made it. We should, knock on wood, have 100% participation. So, thank you.
And just in case districts don't know, when is the due date? Barbara?
The due date is the 2nd, which I believe is Tuesday.
Tuesday.
And I would end on my comments with that I'm really appreciative of Cynthia and the Department of Finance and the folks that are here today, and I hope that they really hear and see that the State Allocation Board has done everything possible to deal with this cash issue, to position us well for any bond sales this fall and next year, which is really important to our program to move forward. So I appreciate that. I like that those folks are in the room and see that this really is the intent of the board. We're obviously a subcommittee of the board, but as we move forward to the full board, and that is our true intent, so that we are well positioned for infrastructure dollars in California to go out to public schools that really can use that money both well educationally and to recover our economy.
Scott?
Well, as we sign off, I just want to acknowledge that the most interesting thing about the creation of public policy is that no one has all the answers, and I think you end up getting better results when you listen to all the voices and have a common goal. And I certainly have enjoyed my time on this board. I think it's an important board. I think making sure kids are safe in schools is a very, very important part of why we all exist. They are our future, and I want to thank all of you for informing me and making me a better participant on this board. And I certainly think this work in particular, that is getting money out quickly, is one of the most important things we've done during my term, and I want to thank you all for being part of that.
Assemblywoman Buchanan?
Well, I just appreciate the work everyone's doing, and I'm excited about, for me, joining the board and hopefully, continuing the program and seeing it improve over time.
Okay, and then so we'll conclude then. I'll work with staff to bring an item. Do you need more direction, or are you?
Yes, I'm clear on option 4, not as clear on options 1, 2, and 3, specifically options 2 and 3.
I think we had a consensus that we're just going to work towards just putting as much cash into priorities as spending as we can, without doing 1, 2, or 3 particularly.
Okay.
Okay, is that right? Does anyone disagree with that? Okay. All right. Well then, we're adjourned. Go Giants.